Some years ago, I was going through a stack of documents, and my task was to make them accessible and come up with some general principles that could be part of a course. So one of the documents was a pamphlet, and there was at the top a legend highlighting some of these. I think these were foods, and some of the foods were tagged, and there was let's say something like a heart, which meant that something was really good for you, and some of these items were tagged with these hearts, right? So looking at examples like this, I realized that the standard technique of just taking something visual and making it text-based misses something. So this was already pretty much text-based. Some of these visual components, like the hearts, could be tagged so that if an assistive technology sees the heart, it knows what it means. So that could be easily translated into text. Like even before I saw the legend, I could glance at this and go, oh, there's like these things with hearts, and I can get that information just at a glance. And I realized that just tagging the hearts is not gonna make the experience of this document the same. Another example, let's say, was something like this. Let's say there was a lot of graphs and tables and stuff in these documents. So one of them, let's say, was like this. So you go, there's some kind of time series, and then it goes like this. Right, so there's a graph. And my standard approach, I guess, would be to take that and turn it into a text-based format, something an assistive technology can easily read, something semantic, like a table, right? So I'd have each of these points would be represented in the table. So something like a screen reader could easily go from column to column. Somebody could scan the columns more easily. But again, I started thinking, as a visual person, is there some information that I get just instantly that isn't conveyed in the table? Something really obvious. And it's this pattern. So yes, every point here is represented in the table, but not the overall pattern. Like if somebody's reading this with a screen reader, there's no real ability, if you can't see, you can't get the equivalent experience from scanning each data point. I don't see that there's a spike, right? I don't perceive it that way. I might put it together, if my screen reader or whatever is reading this table, I might see, oh, there's like a big jump, but that's harder to notice, right? I have to like remember stuff. It's like, oh, it was 80, now it's 160, so that's about twice as big, right? Whereas visually, I can see clearly that, how much something has increased and whether it has, how, it happened halfway and that it became, like 3 times more and so on. So as part of making this document accessible, I started wondering, like, should I convey that kind of information so that there's an equivalent representation of it, not just the data, but the insight that is pretty obvious. So, this could be some kind of summary then, right? Because everything accessible has to be text-based. So this could involve some kind of summary, maybe even before, right? Because this visual part, this visual perception of this and the pattern of it happens instantly for me. So it would be fair if there was some kind of summary capturing that insight, and then the data to supplement it. I was thinking about other visual types of apps, like let's say a driving app. When I put in directions and I get, let's say I'm here, right? That's me here. And then I get driving directions to my destination. Right? I can represent that in a purely textual form. So I can, and you know, it's something like Google Drive and stuff. That, you know, it'll have the visual, and then underneath, it'll have, you know, the steps in text form. So I can read that with some kind of assistive technology because it's now text based. But there's a sense that I get that, you know, visually, there's something about that trajectory there. So let's say Google gave me the same directions this way. Now visually, you know, if I asked you what's the difference between these two, you'd be right away able to tell me, oh, well, that's, you know, that's more direct or more straight, less complicated. And maybe, you know, if I were to translate it into text form, it's kind of embedded in the complexity of the right, the output. Here I have 4 steps. Here I have only 2. So if I scan this, I can you know, I can see that it's simpler, just from the amount of information, just the 2 steps. But visually, it's much more. It's much easier, right? Like if I'm reading something with an assistive technology, I'm having to scan things one by one.
14 minutes, 6.8 kilometers via Scarborough Golf Club RD 110 Poplar Road. Take Coronation Drive to Galloway Road. 1 minute 600 m. Drive along Lawrence Ave and Scarborough Golf Club.
And people using those technologies are really very good at scanning things, like much better than you probably expect, unless you've seen it or you've heard people talk about it. But it's still not the same as I believe looking at this visually and going, oh, I want to go the straighter route. So let's say I Google some store and I get to a Google map, and I'm here, and I'm looking for a place to buy, I don't know, a table, and I see that there's a bunch of roads, and then there's something here, right? And then there's maybe like one there, but there's like there's a stuff there. So visually, I can clearly see that there's a cluster there. So that's probably some kind of furniture district or something like that. So, you know, this one, let's say, could be, maybe there's one even closer. So this one's closer, right? So I could just go there. But this is a much better, much more efficient, right? If I have an afternoon to look for a table, I should go there. And if I were to translate this into text form, well, it's just, you know, be typically just a list of stores. And as I scan through them, I kind of have to remember where each one is. Maybe I don't know these streets. Maybe how far it is from me. Maybe it's like 2 kilometers away, and this one's 3 kilometers away. But it's really difficult if it's just a list, even if it's sorted by proximity, for me to understand that there's a cluster there if I can't see it. And I think it would be fair, if we're trying to translate this whole experience of seeing this into accessible terms, to take that visual information and actually make it explicit. So I would expect a screen like this to tell me, hey, there's a cluster, right? So and maybe there's maybe it's well known. So it's like, you know, it should say like furniture district, or it should say there are like whatever 10, 5, whatever stores. It's not enough, I don't think, to just translate it into text form. That's a good sort of shallow level of accessibility, right? It's like getting in the door. But, you know, the metaphor could be like, it's the door on the back that, you know, you have to walk around, and yeah, you can get in, but it's not very, very easy, and maybe you get lost and you don't even find it. Versus like true deep accessibility, where you can perceive that information in an equivalent way. It's not the same way, but you get the same insight, the same experience through different means. So think about this idea of equivalent experience and what it means for you.